Welcome to A Lit Passage Conversations. I'm James Bubar. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe. Your support really means a lot to us and helps us grow our channel. I'm really excited tonight to be talking from Izmir to, well, I guess it's night in London now too. So I'm actually sort of almost in the same time zone. At least I'm in the same I guess portion of the day. So that's exciting, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by Scottish artist and poet, originally from Dundee, Scotland, and now based in London, Hallidonto. His work stems from and is in dialogue with his Cyborgia Manifesto and subsequent writings such as Cyborgia Cadavers. A graduate of the Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art at the University of Dundee, Hallidonto has presented his exploration of cyborg connections in his art, his writings, his life in such prestigious forums as the Royal Academy of Art, Central St. Martin's, and the NYC Posthuman Forum in New York City. Since 2018, he has been serving as the VR artist in residence at Hobbs Studio. And recently, it's one of the things I'm really excited about to talk with you tonight, Hallidonto. Recently, he has announced that the production has, I guess that would be putting it lightly, production, seeing how complicated your new venture is, but of a production of a new opera called Sanctum of Cyborgia, the interdisciplinary, immersive, and expansive sensory experience, the operatic performance, which will include elements of 3D graphics, AI, holograms, biofeedback, and sense enhancement, will premiere in Scotland in 2021. So welcome, Hallidonto. I'm so glad you could take some time out of I guess, this dystopian pandemic world to talk with me about your work and your opera, which will be coming up next year. It's amazing you could make some time for us.
No, it's an absolute pleasure to be invited, James. It's a real honour to take part in the dialogues that you've been having as well, because some of the artists you've had on radio have been really inspiring to listen to as well. And it's a great thing. I think this is a great space, and we should be sharing these moments about creativity and keeping that kind of hope alive in this kind of dystopian narrative that we're seeing ourselves in at the moment. So, I mean, it's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight.
Well, that's really nice of you to say. I mean, the goal of the channel is just to kind of introduce people to the living creativity all around us, even if it's just the light creeping through the cracks, so to speak. And I'll do my best, because now that I know that you're living in London, and I'm doing it, so I'm not doing my best that well. But I want to talk to you about if you're going to do an updated version of Daniel Defoe's Journal of a Plague Year. But we'll use that for another conversation, right? Right. And I was really excited, and we're going to post your links to the website. You have a couple websites, and your drawings, and I love the shoes and the masks, and you've done so many amazing things that I think I was really excited by your website, where you didn't just have a standard explanation or an artist statement, but you presented a self-portrait. So I thought that may be a good way into you analyzing or pulling out the elements of some of that self-portrait, so we can get into your work. You can take it, of course, any direction, but I encourage people to check out your website, both of them. We have links below. But you have 3 books that you talked about were, I guess, pivotal in your development as an artist, but also as a thinker, as I guess a philosopher. And I thought maybe you could talk about that a little as it relates. And the first book was After Modern Art, 1945 to 2000 by David Hopkins. And I think some people might wonder, what does come after modern art?
Well, it's a great question, and it's a really interesting book. I think for me, like being born in '82, and like I think being born in probably the high point of hyper-capitalism and postmodernism as it stands, So for me, when I was basically graduating in 2008, this was post-modernity. This wasn't postmodernism anymore. So what was this state of, what state of flux are we in, because you had people like Fukuyama saying the end of history,
Right.
and so everybody needs to have contextual ideas to find the framework where they are.
Yeah.
So everybody's like, well, where the fuck are we? You know what I mean? So as an artist, I was like, well, my work has always been of its time, before its time, and ahead of its time. So, I was dealing with a childhood which was embodied by robots, machines, all these kind of existential questions of being human, who we are, who I was, and especially like with my own lived-in experience of my health when I had my lungs damaged when I was in school, when I was bit by a mosquito with my 2 legs, completely damaged my lungs. So I had these kind of nearly aspects of death and being hooked up to machinery, being on morphine and seeing babies with wires coming out their eyes. And then the next thing, I had a brain injury when I was in 2006, where I lost my hearing, ended up with a hearing aid, ended up with tinnitus, and major psychological problems due to brain injury, lethargy, and not really knowing who I was or what I was doing. So I was at university. I was meant to be in my last year, and I just couldn't figure out who Hallidonto was anymore. You know what I mean? And I was really retreated into drawing these really stark one-line figurative drawings, which were kind of very dynamic and posed, but very, 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 they looked very tortured. Do you know what I mean? They're kind of devoid of any sort of humanity in them. And that's kind of how I felt, and it's kind of like looking around me, and the more I was reading, because I got more cerebral when I went to uni, because I grew up in a normal background. And I got in a lot of trouble when I was a kid. But I mean, when I went to university, I got really into. I was always into reading, but I got really cerebral about, philosophy and especially existentialism and postmodernism, which was funny when I was speaking to some guy. He says, "Oh, postmodernism is dangerous philosophy." That's a very strange question, or a very rhetorical statement, because it's like, well, how is it dangerous philosophy? And I found that everything that I grew up with and everything I was reading in these books from Jean Baudrillard, to the basic overviews of postmodernism, the cyborg was always jumping out of the page at me. And that was when I was like, I made a decision. I was like, this is what this work is. This is my metamorphosis, and this is how, and within that framework of going through like artistry, I was influenced by from Marcel Duchamp, for especially his painting. The bride stripped bare by her bachelor's even, right? And the nude descending the staircase. There's all this mechanistic, imagery you'd have, even going from Cubism, but to Duchamp in particular, for me, Duchamp was, this cerebral kind of idea, the mechanism, the art as object. I'll probably go off on tangents with this, James, because there's so many things that go through my head, so many ideas that rush through my head with these things. So for me, when I was reading about this and to understand context, and I think this is, that you have visuals and you have language, and the two of them don't always mix together, So for me, it was I'm trying to explain philosophical concepts by using the cyborg as a symbol, So it's not just me painting cyborgs because I want to show this trite idea of the Terminator. It's about metamorphosis. It's about who I am. It's about who we are. And this bleeds into how, and how art is always another constant inquiry and evolution into what we are and who we are. It's a frame book and it's a memory book. So for me, this book has going from about taken away from the classical idea of body and form. We went through this kind of explanatory period of people were spitting in buckets, and what is a human experience? What is the experiential? And for me, like when it became to these one-line drawings, it was a real sort of connection to me, and it was all about the essence of Graham, the essence of form, the essence of being. And I feel like the cyborg embodies that about the way we are as human beings. Is we can transcend this kind of flesh,
So did your journey as an artist begin from these very stark one-line, as you called them, drawings? Or had you been an artist before, and then this is something kind of new that came into your art based on these experiences? Or was that the birth of you as an artist? Or was it, I guess, the rebirth?
I think I've always been an artist since I was a kid, and this is a more cliched statement to come out with,
right?
Because I don't mean it to be cliche, but what I mean is I think that the way I kind of viewed the world and how I felt about the world is that I never felt comfortable in this body as a child. I didn't speak for years. I mean, I did speak. I had an Italian accent, and my mum was like, "Where is this coming from?" And then she'd say my name, and I'd say, "Don't call me Graham, call me David."
That's amazing.
Then
amazing.
I could use chopsticks, and my family were going, "How does Graham use chopsticks? He speaks Italian. His name's David." So there's these kind of weird things that kind of well, not even weird, just as Graham is this entity and how I viewed the world and what the world meant to me, because I was lost in my imagination as a child. And I used to get old wallpaper, and I would draw performance drawings, so I'd be drawing Transformers, but I'd be acting it out at the same time. So I was always like, this is where I felt comfortable in this space, and this is how I think I've always had this intrigue, and I was always fascinated by Japan. I always wanted to be an animator when I was a child. So I think, but then again, growing up where I grew up, to be arty, if you wish, or to be an artist was kind of, you were seen as, it wasn't a job. You were a weirdo, it was kind of like, it's very, what kids are like. It's just, you're not following the crowd. You're always going to be a fucking the guy in the corner. So I'm trying to play football and absolutely fucking loathing it. Do you know what I mean? Because I hate football. I'm like, but what do you do? It's like, do I play football or do I lose my pals? So, for a while, there's kind of disjointedness about where I was and growing up. But I mean, I always wanted to be an artist, and I think it's kind of the way, this was what my self-expression was, and this is what I needed to hone into. I hope that answers it.
Well, what's really interesting about your kind of journey into, I guess, honoring this feeling or recognizing or answering the call, so to speak, of being an artist is seems to be attached to these illnesses that you experienced. Like they sound horrific, by the way. And that also, what's very interesting is it's not a new question to ask, what is our purpose? What are we doing? Who are we? But it is kind of a new experience to have a young person connected to tubes, being literally sustained by machines, asking that question about humanism. And it seems to me that you're still asking that question and illuminating that question for all of us in this interconnected world. I don't know if I'm projecting, but I was wondering if you saw that similar.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I'm laying out the framework. I see my work as kind of a neo-Renaissance. You know what I mean? It's like there's this whole like iconography that I'm building up. You see, like some of my paintings, they have very much, ideas about cyborgs having babies. And I was like, when I did a talk at St. Martin's with Warren Ellis and Jamie Brassett, Dr. Jamie Brassett, one of the people in the crowd come up and asked, the question. He was like, "Do you think cyborgs would have babies?" And wow. Dr. Jamie Brassett was like, "That's one of the best questions I've ever had in 10 years, about this kind of thing." And I'm saying, well, I've been painting this, I've been painting this idea into my work, and who are we and what does it mean? And even for myself, about like you've just mentioned, like dealing with the machines and dealing with machines in my own personal life, and how they've kept me alive, and how how it informs my work. And I think that it's a self-inquiry. It's always a self-inquiry. It's always like, how do I deconstruct the reality I'm in? And I think that the cyborg is emblematic of my sense of power, of sense of deconstruction, reconstruction, and how it amalgamates various concepts about the way the world that we're in, and especially with people that I've met, like Dr. Francesca Fernardo, like a posthuman philosopher. Posthumanism to me is probably the most, at the moment, and I could probably be in a bit fetishism about it here, but I think it's probably one of the most purest philosophies, because it's about it's rejecting humanism, it's rejecting Anthropocene. It's about bringing everybody from every community, whether it's from LGBT to indigenous people, and getting rid of the old narratives that we've been embodied into our culture. Because I think that half the time, it's like working 9 to 5. That's a Puritan concept. Why am I adhering to this nonsense? I'm not a Puritan. I'm not even a Catholic. So a lot of these things, and the way we've been built up the framework of reality, I think right now this is why we could say we're in a crisis, because the old order doesn't work anymore. And there's new thoughts, there's new thinking, there's new ideas. How we interact with the objects around us. Like, these are not just objects of material. These objects share the space with you. that's similar to Zen. You know what I mean? It's like we're all cohabiting in this space with other non-humans, humans, animals, all these things. We have to have an equilibrium. Nothing should be seen as this human exceptionalism, and and this is kind of where I struggle with the human exceptionalism, because we're not exceptional.
Yeah.
And
it seems
hubris.
Yeah, and it seems like one of posthumanism's great offerings is, for lack of a better word, is the use of the idea of the network, about everyone having an essential place, which is its radical inclusivity. And of course, there's important humanist values, which we'll take with us, but this kind of radical individualism, this atomistic world, is, I think, the one that you're talking about, where it's being exploded just in our conversation. This network effect, and how boundaries are blurred and everything serves, and we're all the radical interconnection. Baudrillard has this concept of the hyper-real. He's talking about like movie blood is more real than blood, But now we're in this. I wish Baudrillard, rest in peace, was around, because I would love to hear him talk about this hyper connection we're in now. Where walking down the street, I can be texting my fiance in Russia, or my friend in LA, or talk to you, and it's just this. And I think that that posthumanism is talking about that positive networking, and that's why. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like your art is helping to facilitate the firing along the network for people to realize this change, or this existential situation we're in. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that the human is not a fixed thing,
Yeah.
Because we're creating the narrative. This is what which is what freaks me out now. The more I've read and the more you deconstruct things, that we're making the narrative go along. There's no something random around. We're generating it. We create construct societies to try and make sense of our world. So why do we need to get hung? And why is it we hung up about who has sex with who? Who cares? What does it matter?
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It's like the economy. It's like the economy is a false economy. There's no intrinsic value to this. We instill value into it. But when I have these conversations with some people, they go, well, you can't talk about money like that. It's like, you can, because it's like, because the more that we realise, and the way I'm seeing the way society is about sustainability and reusing things, that, and the idea of universal basic incomes and automation taking over jobs, good. I want the robots to take this on. We want free of this drudgery. Do you know what I mean? That we can hopefully clean the societies, change things for the better. And I'm not going to say it's all going to be utopian, because human beings and non-humans are probably going to have arguments. That's fine. You know what I mean? But we can have a better place than what we have now. Yeah, and we have to let go of these old orders, because they're just not working.
Well, and they're collapsing. I mean, it's World War I saw the collapse of all these grand narratives about how we thought things should be, including the nature of warfare itself. And it seems we're seeing with the pandemic and the economic kind of ramifications, this collapse also of these maybe not as grand, but definitely narratives that are we're trying to totalize our lives. As an American, we're seeing them try to recreate these Cold War narratives that would put everything in its place and tell you how to behave. We're seeing the federal banks try to advance their narratives, but it's not working, because we're living in a reality where we're sensing that things aren't. These were lies, or they're creations, and not necessarily for us, but we're living in this other world that's, I think, emerging, which is why I'm so fascinated by your work and other work about, or thinkers of futurists, or artists who are working in quote unquote dystopian or quote unquote cyborgia, kind of symbol systems.
Yeah, and I think, like, leading on to that point as well, like you said, it's like Baudrillard. Can you imagine what Baudrillard would have about psyops? With Cambridge Analytica. Could you imagine the essays? Because I've got the essay, the Gulf War never happened.
Yep.
And it's fucking true. It's like the agenda it's not even conspiracy. The agenda was already started, and all what you witnessed was just spectacle and hyperbole off the scale. Yeah. And like you said, the blood was more real on the screen than it was on the street.
Yeah.
So again, when people say post-truth, fake news, it's like, how do you know a lot of the media you've been consuming has been real anyway?
Right.
Because how do you know this? And this is, and people are, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I take things, I've got a broad mind. I don't think things are fixed.
Right.
But certainly when you see things like Cambridge Analytica, Brexit, go for Scottish independence, and they talk about Russian interference, that's obviously, it's easy to blame Russia because that's always been a scapegoat. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not blaming Russia here because the thing is, who is in fucking control half the time? You don't know. You just don't know what's going on. You know what I mean? And that's a Baudrillard nightmare. Yeah. It's a hyper-reality nightmare.
Well, this is why I think artists are so important, because people aren't living in these narratives they're trying to sell you. One way to claim that you're true is call someone else fake, right? So it's an assertion. But meanwhile, when they're spinning all this stuff and think they're having an effect, most people are literally living in a different world. Like, they're not going to buy this China Cold War narrative as much as. So it's really, really interesting time. But, I don't know if you know this, but Baudrillard was approached to cover the war in 1992, and he was asked to write about it as the work that you referenced. And it's a text that everyone should read, the Gulf War. But he said that he would only cover it from his hotel room. And everyone thought he was crazy, because that time they were embedded reporters, and there was the Scud Stud, and they were doing these, it was really barbaric. They were doing these nightly broadcasts about missiles and how many casualties. Yeah. It was like a sporting event where they were giving the statistics at the end of the night. It was horrible. And Baudrillard,
I remember that,
and Baudrillard said that I'm going to cover it from a hotel watching TV because that's where the war is going to happen. And then you saw all the graphics, and you saw all the media personalities created, and the images of the smart bombs, and this kind of trying to reconstruct war in our head that it was somehow, okay. And then, of course, but that seems like child's play compared to now in a way. But this is a good move into the second book, and hopefully we won't spend an hour just on these 3 books. But I do want to, you've got to talk about this book because I haven't read it. Wow. It's Transhumanism, Engineering the Human Condition by Roberto Manzocco, I believe. Manzocco?
Yeah.
And maybe it's what you've already said, but maybe you could talk about that effectively on your work and your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Just put into context what it was. It was about 2015. I was sending out emails to 450 galleries in 2 days. I mean, I was just like going like somebody in the art world, or somebody's got art is of its time, and this is me going off on a rant about it. But there's got to be somebody who knows what I'm talking about, or has similar interests. Where are these futurists? And then I came across Francesca Fernardo's TED Talk. Mm-hmm. And I went, right, without swearing, I'm just going to send her an email. Fuck it, why not? I'm just going to send her an email. Who knows? You'll never know. So I send her an email about the work. Next thing, I'm standing in Notting Hill with my friend. An email comes through the phone. Graham, I'd love to invite you to the Posthuman Forum in New York. And I was like,
wow.
Holy shit!
Now that is inspiration, my friend. So email these people, connect, reach out to them who have moved.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, for me, it's like I have no fear. You know what I mean? It's just like if these people are in the same thing you're doing, you've got to speak to these people. Yeah. So I sent the email. And I remember, I think GoFundMe just arrived, and I remember like actually getting a GoFundMe trying to get me to get a flight there. And I remember like some people donating and going, "Well, Graham's doing this," and I got invited the same year to speak at the Royal Academy as well. So to do the manifesto there, and then I had to go to New York and do this. So it was kind of a double speak. And I remember some women fell out with me on Facebook. She went, "I can't believe that you're asking people for money for a flight." I'm like, I'm a skint artist I've got to speak to these people. I've got to find some way to get there, at the time. So it was like, so I went there and I seen who I was on the panel with, and Roberto was on the panel with me. And me and him the whole panel were brilliant, but me and him just got off, straight from the start, just like I was talking about my work and the imagery, and he was like, he always said that I remind him of like the David Lynch of Cyborgs, because he's like, you just go off on this.
That's a great.
On these mad world,
That's a great blurb. Wow, the David Lynch of cyborg art. Yeah.
He's like.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead, James.
No, I was just going to ask you to talk a little bit about maybe how you changed encountering that book, or maybe how that book or the principles or the ideas of transhumanism maybe helped coalesce maybe some
Yeah.
ideas, give you a language for it that then could you could put into your art if there was that kind of relation. I'm always fascinated with that kind of relationship with
Yeah.
with texts.
Well, I mean, some of the, I mean, to start off, I mean, what was interesting, because I was writing up this exhibition I'd done in 2019 was about cyborg cadavers, and I wrote the cadavers piece.
Mm-hmm.
So taking this Promethean allegory and mixing it with my Birth of the Cyborg VR project, when I'm taking drawn one-line cyborgs, and that was about birth and, you know, all this kind of like narrative based on the Promethean allegory.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got Roberto's book, then you started reading it. It had, like, you know, Faust, the Faustian deal, the Prometheus, Gilgamesh,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, wow, this is really fascinating, because this is reminiscent, like informing what I'm thinking about at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it'll go on for a lot of interesting theories from physicists about worm cam theories, you know, and which helped me write the synopsis for my opera.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, and I'm also a thing as well, like, there's a physicist in the book who talks about, like, Matryoshka dolls as these large structures. And I've been obsessed with Matryoshka dolls since 2016 about the continuous line, the genealogy, and I call them the cyborg genealogy. So for me, there's a lot of this kind of, you know, Jungian kind of synchronicity when I was reading this book and going, like, I'm thinking about this, and now people are writing about this, so I'm we're on the same page here. And there's, like, a lot of theories about, you know, Natasha Vita Moore and Max Moore who are talking about freezing the body, and, you know, this kind of trying to figure out extending life forms. And also, there's a positive transhumanism. I think that transhumanism sometimes is seen, or in technology in general, seems to get a bad light in the press. So it's like this kind of Skynet thing they can't get over. You know, you present an idea and it's suddenly inherently bad, and it's like, well, no. Because, I mean, if that was the case, then stop taking your paracetamol tablets. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it kind of freaks me out. So there's a lot of, like, positivity. I mean, you know, there's even the idea that there's religious groups who are into transhumanism. You know, like, there's Mormons into trans. So this is like extending my research and how people are thinking about, you know, cheating. And instead of the word cheating death and choosing to say this is not cheating death. Again, the human's not a fixed thing. There doesn't have to be glory in dying. Why not extend the life if we can do it? So this is kind of like the philosophy around that I found particularly interesting, and not just the ideas of tech. I mean, even the idea, you know, when the physicists talking about new ideas of energy, and again, which informs, like, Donna Haraway from her manifesto about new life forms. I mean, what kind of new life forms can there be? You know, because all this gene mixing and all this trips me out, and with imagery, do you know what I mean, as well? And this is kind of like led to me, inspired a lot for me in the opera, about with my own work, and I'm blending this all together. Then, like, even the concepts of memory, and, you know, what would a huge superstructure Matryoshka life form think about? You know, so I got real inspiration from this as well, and with my own stuff in that way. So for me, when I'm reading that, my mind just thinks in imagery. Do you know what I mean? Which tries to visualize philosophy, and that's what I got from it. And especially because I know him as well, it's even more amazing when you read someone that you've met. Do you know what I mean? Because it just really stimulates you as well. And I find that, you know, like, the stuff that he's compiled there in these theories, like I've just mentioned, are just really, really fascinating. You know, it's like I couldn't.
Yeah, well, you just gave a beautiful. I don't know if it's a description or objective of art to visualize philosophy. I mean, it was beautifully said, and I think it was Donna Haraway.
That's
Haraway.
right,
Yeah, I think it was Donna Haraway that she was talking about. One of the things that's interesting is the more people write about cyborgs now, or this interconnection with technology, the more it's actually not a break where it's something that started in whatever 1984, but rather it's a realization that in some sense it's always been with us. I think she writes about Galileo with the telescope, you know, as one of the first cyborg relationships, and how that's changing his you know, literally changed his ability to see, or the earliest glasses that people wore, and that's how we should think about, because that then that addresses what you were talking about, that this notion of posthuman is kind of it's not just a heartbreak that started now and let's get rid of
Yeah.
humanism, but rather we should think in the past about how we were interconnected and were built with technology and had a relationship with technology. Or you think of the artist with the sculpture, or with the chisel,
Yeah.
with the Michelangelo with the chisel. And so it's fascinating how it's obviously really technical and looking forward with this crazy hyper technological world, but these ideas are re-seeing the past as well.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I think that the idea of like the robot or the extension of the human has always been there. From Greek myths to
Yep.
even before that, it's always been there. There's
Yes.
never been a separation.
Right.
And for me, it's like, and that's what I find incredibly fascinating. Again, when I'm like, quoting myself, it's like, and I said, my work is of its time before its time, it's ahead of its time. I'm not trying to change the wheel here, but I think that I'm putting a case forward for the post-human, transhuman ideas that are upon us, and this is what's going to happen. I feel like the flesh is now the chrysalis for new life forms, and it was like a while ago I started having dreams about H.P. Lovecraft, like randomly having a dream about. I knew of his work, and what was really weird again when I did do that, I went online, and a few days later there was an article from Donna Haraway called The Cthulhu Scene.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was thinking, when Lovecraft, about his idea of these, omnipresent, omnipotent beings that you can't even comprehend, just informed even more of my work in these kind of ideas of new species. And, it's always ever present that we're trying to, let go of this body,
Yeah.
get rid of it,
Yeah.
change it into something else.
Well, yeah, you go back all the way to Ovid's masterpiece, Metamorphosis, and it's always, I mean, this fixed. I think you had attached it to the humanism, but this fixed individual atomic human. But in Ovid's Metamorphosis, people can the whole book is about these myths exploring transformations, some that are beautiful, others that are rather horrifying.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
you're right. It is. So this very quote unquote futuristic approach is helping us see back into our past and
yeah.
redefine ourselves in both directions. And I think that's fascinating about your work, particularly as you talked about the Matryoshka doll. Seems like that's what you're getting at.
I mean, there's a lot of synchronicity in my work about things that I see. I mean, it's like, it sounds a bit esoteric, but there is a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these things. Like one of my favorite films is Akira. Akira's number's 28. My birthday's 28. Marcel Duchamp's my favorite artist. We're born on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Ready Player One film, when I was using virtual reality. The guy who created that simulation's name's Halliday. Literally my second name.
Wow.
And it's like all these kind of weird like associations that I have, and people go as coincidence. And I was like, I don't believe in coincidence.
Yeah.
So for me, it just solidifies, whether it's my romanticism. I mean, I don't care. It's what informs my art. I mean?
Right.
It drives me to explore these worlds.
Yeah.
And I think, just alluding to what you said about the Ovid, is interesting when you have, like, Fernando cites this as well, when you have, Michel Foucault, when he talks about institutions and man,
Mm-hmm.
and rejecting the idea of man. And then you have, obviously, Nietzsche before this, the Overman,
Mm-hmm.
would be I think this Overman would be laughing at us all, because it's like, I find that the post-humanism and the cyborg and the bodies that you see that I have they're limbless, they're genderless,
Mm-hmm.
they're beyond these archaic narratives I think we get tied up in society.
Yeah.
Gender roles. I mean, it's becoming now, like, it's like we have to. This is. It seems that we're just not going forward sometimes. We just seem to be stuck in this base idea of humanism. I mean, I just kind of want to get out over it. I mean, I kind of want to get away from it.
Yeah. Well, and it seems like it's more nefarious that we're not just stuck in some quagmire, but rather we're if you want to think of the Matrix or a lot of other stories, these are sold to us. These are definitions imposed on us. These are things limiting our sense of connection or our sense of boundarylessness,
Yeah.
and that again your work, but also the movement, and we'll get on. It seems to be exploding these fixes, these fixed definitions that ultimately dehumanize us and disconnect us, and turn us into certain, like consumers, for example. That I am, therefore I consume, therefore I am kind of narrative.
Yeah, that's a good. You just said a great word there, because I remember like one of my degree show many moons ago, when it's when I first met Danny, and one of my pieces were these. I was probably one of the first people to use 3D printing. I collaborated in the whole of that year. It just come out in 2008. So I made these 7-foot figures that had flash nozzles for heads, right? And people going, "Oh, it's cameras." I went, "It's nothing as cliche as cameras. It's about consuming and thus being consumed and being legitimized only by the things that you consume." Right. So these kind of heads and these kind of caricatures were kind of a homage to Roland Barthes, about when he talks about the semiotics of washing powder. So I kind of reduced you to this bottle of germ fluid that you just go about spraying each other to legitimize. So there's kind of this satire, irony, within it. Right. And that was kind of, I would say that was kind of the pretext of my cyborgs. They were kind of the first, kind of initial cyborg idea. And it's like, it's kind of fascinating how this is metamorphosized into that. And I think that one interesting thing I think in context of that is how people who are in the LGBT community, have been fighting for this, to be who they are. And again, what I find it could be kind of paradoxical is when the cyborg presents itself in a way where this is completely a level playing field. Yeah. Will they feel undermined? Would they feel undermined by this? Is this going to be an issue, or will everybody try and accept that? So there's a lot of kind of caveats for me when you start thinking about this, and who and what we are and who we're going to be in society. Yeah.
Well, we've been talking esoteric and conceptual, and before I just want to touch on that last book, and I think it relates to your experiences of the body, because talking with you, you're as you mentioned, this cerebral aspect really kind of flowed into your art in university years and probably in your studies, but beyond your studies. But you had the other book that was interesting. You had Constructive Anatomy by Bridgman. And so I'm wondering if this was, even though you were reading transhumanism and art theory and postmodern art developments, was this your sense of kind of getting to re-know your body that had gone through these challenges?
Yeah.
Or was it something more just it helped your drawing, or both?
No, I think that's a very good analysis. I think there is a sense of that, because if I look through the evolution of my drawings and even my work now, you see a lot of them they've got no limbs, they've got long tongues, they have very really strange kind of bodies, and I think that there is a sense of reconstruction. Like how am I reconstructing Hallidonto? Because I felt like when there's one particular drawing I did called No Exit, with the figures bending over, and this was a kind of very prominent piece for me, because I had to make a choice. I felt like I had to make a choice. Am I ever going to give up, and succumb to this kind of what's happened, or I'm going to have to be Hallidonto to pursue my visions, and the grace, like the way the grace of my lines and this kind of sentiment and romanticism is like, kind of reminds me of being like Optimus Prime. I've got to be a fucking hero here. I've got to push this out. I've got to go for it. Because with people I grew up in, like I said, everybody wants to be comfortable, do they? They don't want to go past the fence, right? And I'm banging on about cyborgs and going shouting about this in the uni, and a good friend of mine, and I'm like, I believe in this. I've just got to take it forward. And this drawing was really the catalyst for me. So it was a reconstruction, and it's a forever inquiry into who I am as an artist and as an individual. Because we're ironically, as much as we kind of evolve in your mind, your body is deconstructing and decomposing as you go. So this is kind of an interesting thing, because even when I was asked before, like about the body, and everybody was sitting there who was transhumanists like Warren Ellis and Dr. Jamie Brass, I said I want to die, and they were like, what? And they're like, hold on, but you draw all these things and now you want to die. And I was like, well, I said, I don't need to live forever. But I mean, for me, that's my personal thing. So but for me, for this reconstruction of the body.
Mm-hmm.
I'm positive about the transhuman and the posthuman. Mainly, I'm more posthuman than I am transhuman.
Mm-hmm.
I have no issue about the augmentation, and I think that everybody should have allowed to choose their morphological freedoms.
Mm-hmm.
It shouldn't be dictated to you when you die, and there shouldn't be this kind of notion about feeling guilty to live forever.
Yeah.
It's we have no answers about what lies beneath, so why not extend it? So for me, there's the more I've evolved in my work of late, James, is for me, like the opera we're going to allude to, is about what does it mean to be human, but don't be afraid to let go of being human, and become something else.
Yeah, I can't wait to get to the opera part because I'm starting to see it in new ways. But before we get there, there's just I'm curious about you just referenced not being afraid to kind of step out of your comfort zone. So I thought of Frodo. Frodo is told by Gandalf, you have to leave the Shire. Everyone has to leave the Shire. First, you have to answer the door when the wizard knocks, and then you have to leave the Shire and save the world in a way. And that's all of us we do. And like Frodo, you realize the interconnectedness. That's not a journey that can come out of a singular atomized self. It's constantly as helpers and coincidences and other people help you on that quest. But I'm curious about some of the other, because pop culture seems to be this where these images, as you said, took root first. Whether you think of H.R. Geiger, his amazing work, famous for Aliens, but has done so many incredible works. There's a great documentary, if you haven't seen it, about his house that has now recently been turned into a museum, or if it was Philip K. Dick novels or The Matrix. So could you talk a little bit about that in your
absolutely
in your art?
I think that one of the first my comic books I think really inspired me. I'd never seen anything like it. It was definitely Akira. I really identified with the antagonist Tetsuo, being the kind of outsider in a group with people, and you're trying to fit in, but you always seem to be the odd one out for whatever reason. When he ends up getting in this accident, and he ends up taken away from the military and given these drugs, and suddenly has this kind of great power, but he really just wanted to be accepted. But because the way he felt, he kind of this great power, it was well, I'm just going to just deconstruct all of you to make you feel like shit. And I can understand that, you can understand that, and I was like, and I kind of. And when I seen that film, when I convinced my gran to buy this, when I was 8 years old, she was like, "This is a 15." I went, "It's just a cartoon." And she went, "Okay." So she buys.
Okay. Hold on a second. You saw Akira when you were 8?
Yep.
Okay, you have to come back on, and we have to discuss the ending. I saw it. Saw it in a theater in LA with like 300 people, and it was no one had ever seen anything like this. And no one understood the ending of that film, including myself. But I think you did. So I don't want to get sidetracked, but I'm just amazed that you saw that at 8, and I'm no wonder it made such a powerful impression.
Oh, James, honestly, I think as well, like when I had my brain injury and I'd had PTSD and I came back from Germany, and I couldn't cry, and I had tinnitus, and I was obviously like all these things that were going on, and I came in the house after being in the hospital, and I put on the Akira soundtrack. It's my most favourite soundtrack. Every time I listen to that, my hairs will stand up on end, and I'll cry. It'll make me cry instantly. Wow. Right? And I put that song on, which is 14 minutes long, and it's like a journey. And it was, have you ever had any trauma in your life, and you have a chance where you have this cry, and your body just feels completely metamorphosized. Like you've actually managed to go over something. And that film and that comic book it's not just a comic book or that for me. It has so much resonance, It's like, when I watched that as a kid, and my mum come through watching, and she said, I'm sitting there crying at the music, and I'm fucking 8 years old. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I went, I could just feel it. It's just like, I just could feel that film, and it's like when I read them books, and that led me to go right into this in Japan, like this. I wasn't inspired by Dundee culture. You know what I mean? It's not because I don't like my hometown. This was an escapism. I'm a bedroom boy. Do you know what I mean? It's like this is what I see, and it's like when I watched Ghost in the Shell when I was about 12. I got the comic book. I was reading this, this is heavy. And I was reading this stuff, and I'm just going, the bodies, and some of there's a wee homages in my work, little circles of homages to Masamune Shirow, who wrote Ghost in the Shell, and Appleseed. And Appleseed and Ghost in the Shell are just like the mangas. The animes are wonderful, but the mangas are just, fucking fantastic. It's such a, he references in Appleseed, like Greek mythology, the biodroids are named Etermis, all these kind of things, and that kind of tripped me out. And, Ovid, and these names come through it, and the idea of, new consciousness, new realities, especially in Ghost in the Shell. So this visual style for me was amazing. And also as well, like video games, for me, like this Capcom Street Fighter games and Neo Geo SNK, the way the poses were, and the art style was just so fresh. And I didn't like Western art, as in like American comic book art. Not because, there's a lot of it I do like, but at the time, it wasn't for me. This kind of genre I seen from Japan, and robots, the way they were designed, just tripped me out. And I was just like, I was fully immersed in it, and I used to watch them, and I always loved when things would transform over the body, and I always wanted that kind of transformation in myself. So I kind of see that with my own work. It's kind of like taking that little boy, part of that little boy, and making that boy bigger. And this is. And for me, when it came to literature, it was like, I remember reading William Gibson's Neuromancer.
Oh, yeah.
When I must have been about 14, 15. And that was a ride. And there was a game called Shadowrun on the SNES, which was a cyberpunk game, which was kind of obviously clearly influenced by that. And Blade Runner as well. Seeing that when I was young. Aliens, like you mentioned, H.R. Geiger. And Tetsuo, you ever seen Tetsuo Body Hammer? I seen that on Channel 4, and I thought because it had Tetsuo, it was linked to the character and Akira. And I stuck it on, and I must have been about 13 or 12, 13, going, holy shit, what the hell is this? Because it was just mad. It was like body horror gone awry, wasn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Videodrome. All these video nasties that you've seen, you know what I mean, as well. You've seen all these, and Channel 4 in the UK used to have all these mad art house films. Wow. I think that I don't think there's a more exciting time to be alive in terms of what we experienced visually, at the time in the 80s, and grids everywhere. Everything had grids, all the neon grids, Tron. This. I do see grids in my work everywhere, because I'm just obsessed by it.
Well, and isn't it interesting how I'm thinking of Ghost in the Shell, and there's a famous poster, and it was also a tapestry of her, and she's plugged into all these, tubes and like, and a lot of this art in Geiger as well presaged this hyper connectivity that we don't have the tube sticking in all over our back, but Matrix does it as well, but now we have the cell phone, or it's just fascinating how these artists picked up these things that were in the air about interconnectedness and the blurring between human and machine that now is being explored more by artists, of course, like yourself, because you can build on that, but also this reality of interconnectedness about these boundaries that we thought were boundaries of self are, not.
No, indeed, and but one thing for me is like I try to get away from the established cyberpunk aesthetic into my own aesthetic, because I don't want to have, it's not about, I don't want a half machine, half man. My works are completely other beings in themselves, so I kind of made a conscious decision to reinvent the idea of the cyborg. The cyborg is not what these figures are necessarily are. Not anymore, because I feel the term will become redundant. I'll be known as the guy who does cyborgs, but that's fine. But for me, with the way of work I'm doing at the moment, these kind of oils, which are kind of biomorphic embryos, and the Matryoshka, the opera, and all these kind of things. I explore different realities, and it's like I've tried to go back to draw human beings, and I just can't do it anymore. I think I'm just too far down to this, aspect of new life forms, new life forms, and all the stuff I've been doing with my drawings, and recontextualizing them, deconstructing them, and making them a different kind of Byzantine Renaissance-esque frescoes. This is what I've been doing digitally, and with using the virtual reality as me in the one-line drawing, because you can never make a sculpture in one line. When I draw in one line, and again, the one line is all about DNA construction, metamorphosis. The one line is infinite, isn't it? And that's the way I see the kind of cyborg and the way we are as science. It's infinite. It's never, when is it going to end? What is the idea of time? So there's all this kind of stuff that I'm thinking about within my work. And the one line is very, very prominent with how I do things. It's not a gimmick, it's how I draw. It's how
right. So was this realization you're talking about, how you're different from the, I guess you would say, the vintage or classic cyborg, half human, half machine? Is this what drove your Cyborgia manifesto, or is this something that's come later, and that was just a step on the journey?
I think when I started doing a lot of these stark drawings, these one-line drawings, they were kind of still human in a sense, in a way. And I think from there, like that drawing I mentioned, and a couple of years later, they started to become completely different entities. You know what I mean? And I wanted to generate my own style where they didn't even look, like what's been established in a sense with this kind of genre. Because I mean, I'm a cyberpunk at heart, but my work's not cyberpunk.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's posthumanism. It's transhumanism. It's philosophy. For me, there's such abstract notions in my work. About what people. Well, only I get. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and sometimes I have to define words, but they're just there as an entity, and I'm kind of exploring. I try and explore as many things as possible, from oils, and I'm trying to build things on vox pixels, in cubes, and trying to take my own aesthetic into different things. So it's like, and like this moment with the shoes I've been doing in this Hive Mind Omega, I'm actually in the process of doing a series of post-human poetry with all the regalia, with my mask and the hood and everything else. And my mate's like, "Are you building a cult?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't know yet." Because it's so. I mean, it's kind of like I have so many things that go through my head in this, and it's like I don't make these shoes or these clothes for everybody to wear. These are for me to wear. This is kind of my, church of Cyborgia, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, that's beautiful. And there was one line that jumped out at me from the Cyborgia manifesto, and you said, "Contemporary society explores the perversions of the media." And two things jumped out at me, and you can comment on it, take any direction you want. The first thing that jumped out at me was contemporary society explores the perversions of the media. The first thing, given our time now, I thought about was the media industrial complex that's generating these narratives. But you could also think about media as air, because we're almost breathing media now in terms of like now we're talking via internet and YouTube, and then you're seeing people on the screens all day. So the perversions of this notion of media as air or water we're swimming in, alongside the perversions of the media industrial complex, which is definitely agenda driven, and usually to create consumers or create, keep oligarchic masters happy. Then the other thing I thought was really interesting about that sentence was you could switch. Often people switch those, and what I loved is you kind of switched it before. You would usually think media explores the perversions of contemporary society. That's the message we're told, right? That media is this great hero exploring our perversions and educating us and teaching us. But you reversed it. I thought that was genius. And I mean, maybe it's connected to larger parts of the work, but it seems to me that's also what you're doing in your work, is reversing or complicating these simplifying narratives that kind of keep us down or keep us limited in our vision of what it means to be human. So
indeed, and I think like what you just said there, and the reason for that statement is, like, one of the reasons for that statement is, I remember, for example, at college many years ago, right, and we were subjected to a series of fucking animal projects, and that's like, I don't mind saving the animals, but there's more stimulus going on here. And like, you've probably heard of the horrible tabloids that we have in the UK called The Sun, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I remember like reading these as a kid, and you'd have like, the front page would be perverts, blah blah blah, like a pervert scenario, right? Terrible, 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 and then it's like 4 pages explaining his depravity, right? And it's like,
and don't they don't they have like the page 6 girl or the page 3 girl in
Well,
the
they used to.
Sun?
That's what I was going to say. So
Yeah, then they would be objectifying women. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you've got this depraved article. Then
Yeah.
the next page, women with her breasts out, and then the next thing is saying immigrants or like Muslims or whatever, or a section about like different immigrant people.
Yeah.
Then it's like save the people across the world, and this kind of fucking about with your brain. You know what I mean? It's like,
That's
what am I meant to
perverse.
believe here?
Yeah.
And it's perversion,
Yeah.
right? And then like you'd have come by the news of the world, and you'd have like a 10-page pull out of serial killers, and I was like, well, what about the 10 best thinkers in the world or something? You know what I mean? So it's like this kind of weird, what are you pushing here? I didn't understand it when I was reading it. So I remember making these series of screen prints that had, Myra Hindley and all these serial killers and called it the Products of Society and took all the pages out. And some of my lecturers went, oh, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I went, how? And they went, well, that's not art. I went, of course it's art. Art is sociological. It's like the Renaissance was sociological art. It was about the idea of God, and people were reading about how they're meant to be. I says, this is what we're consuming. So this is a critique. There's an irony here, but there's a critique. Now take like Tiananmen Square and was doing that, and even though that was years later, and doing like shades of red of a Kalashnikov. And it's just like, I don't know what you're going with this game. I says, it's political. Because this is political. What you're reading, and I remember like the Gulf War, when I was a kid, I wanted to say earlier, I remember like seeing these illustrations of Scud missiles, like this kind of exactly what you described, right? In the same newspaper. So this fantasy of war. And I've still got, I'm going to send it to you later, that I've still got this thing that was basically a pull out about the weapons they're going to use in the new Gulf War in 2001. The spectacle. And it's just like and on the front cover reminded me of the game. The game Metal Gear Solid by Hideo Kojima, right? He's a genius. I love Kojima, right? And the whole front cover looked like a scene from Metal Gear Solid. Do you know what I mean? Everybody's standing like, here you go, boys, to your death for an ideological idea that you have no idea what you're doing. And when I was looking at this, I'm going, we are living in complete hyper reality. This is hyper reality gone right.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what the fuck they're doing. Nobody knows what to believe, and everybody's scared of one another, and they don't even know why.
Yeah.
And it's like this is the perversion. This is what I see.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting what crimes are conveniently left out of the media, like crimes of.
Exactly.
Of our crimes of our government in the name of so-called advancing democracy. But, you think of this notion of the cyborg, and, there's someone sitting in Kansas who's flying a drone and looking at a screen, which is by design built like the video games that they grew up on. And then they're launching missiles at some family wedding. Thinking it's a quote-unquote terrorist in, 10,000, 12,000 kilometers away. And and then they go home to their wife or their family or their lover or go home by themselves or whatever. But that's a really crazy future that we're in now. That's what's happening.
Indeed.
Yeah, and
you remember that?
And these drones fly 24 hours a day with people controlling them from thousands of miles away.
Yeah, exactly. And that was like, remember in the 90s as well when Doom when that came out? Right, so everybody was using Doom. Then the next thing I remember seeing a program, and basically the US Army was having men sitting playing Doom all day to try and desensitize you to violence.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Then the actual US Army, and no doubt the British Army and whatever, they have interest in the gaming industry for that. So that's, it's really, really strange how you could manipulation, or what kind of manipulation can happen, or what they're desensitizing you to, and like Hollywood or film, like these mass-produced things of like what culture is about, starving yourself or body shaming people. It's awful. Look how many mental health issues are because people think they have to be thin or they have to be. You don't want to be exponentially fat, but again, you don't know what's wrong with the person, but this kind of perfect body, which doesn't exist.
Yeah, this is getting back to those.
Freaks me out.
Yeah, this was getting back to that notion of the kind of imprisoning narratives that were sold and that are forced down our throats, so to speak. But I thought, I think it's the most recent season of Black Mirror It was the finale when they had the soldiers didn't know they were kind of wearing those glasses, if I remember correctly, and those glasses made the enemy look less than human. Remember that? Or they had the kind of implant, but they literally couldn't see the enemy as human. Wow, it was really powerful.
But does that not remind you of John Carpenter's film They Live?
Yes.
That was a piece of cinematic genius. You know,
yes.
that was absolute gold. And even like Videodrome, if you think about it, Videodrome is, I mean, I remember reading an article and it's like the pretext for YouTube. You know, the sinister channel that you can log on to, and you know, basically the advent of cyber sex before cyber sex was a thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like you think about the way, like, for example, technology and that notion. It's like people were making sex games and there were 8-bit graphics, thinking that looked great. Then 16-bit, then you know, and they got to get more real. So it's like humans. You know, I think like Heidegger says that as well. You know, technology reveals us even more.
Yeah. Well, what's so amazing about They Live is that you put the glasses on to see. You know, it's really that's like a techno manifesto there, because usually you would think you take off these glasses that were, and remember that log fight, he's trying to get his friend to wear the glasses and he won't put them on. And that movie's incredible. When that movie came out, I don't know if anyone saw it, but now people are watching it, and Zizek talks about it a lot in one of his films. But let's move on to your huge project. It ties in, certainly, it seems, to a lot of the I don't want to say magnum opus because you're too young for that right now, or maybe it is, I don't know. But it does,
I said that one time, mate.
it does seem to be very ambitious, my friend, and also drawing a lot of strands from your previous experience, whether it was in multimedia or drawing or film editing. But honestly, when I read that introduction, I felt like I needed to take a break. I felt like I needed to pause the camera and like take a break when I started talking about AI and holograms and biofeedback and human sensory expansion and then it's an opera. So I think opera in a way does a lot of that anyways, right? Trying to have the biggest moments, you know, at the operatic moment. But then you start adding all of this other stuff. I felt like I needed a break. And now I'm ready to hear about it. So I'd love to hear about how it's going now and maybe what's behind it. Whatever you want to tell us about Sanctum.
I can say a little bit. I can say it a bit. I can't say too much.
Of course.
So, but I mean, to start off, I mean, my friend Kat, a good friend of mine from, she's a journalist based in Manchester. She's from Canada. So I was talking to her about this. This is what I want to do. I want to take on, you know, an ambitious project. And at the start, COVID happened, and I kind of went, well, that's not going to happen, is it? You know. So like my friend, she phoned me up and says, Graham, like, what are you doing? I says, what do you mean? She says, could you start writing that script? And I was like, why? She went, well, let's do it. This is the perfect time to do it. And I was like, yeah, you're right, you know. Yeah. Wow. So I was like, so we looked around and we seen like there was an opportunity, like open funding, Creative Scotland, right? So I was like, right, fuck it, I'm just going to go for it. So I managed to amass. Kat is the producer, my good friend who's a co-script writer, Ralph, who's like a lecturer at St Martin's also. He's works in immersive theatre, and loads to his bow. Bushra, another wonderful one of the top tech women in London for interactive costumes, a choreographer I'd worked on before, and Dr. Liza, who's based in Miami, who's like a Max MSP specialist, and a composer called Ergo Famitz, who does all these really interesting collages. He basically made an opera lately, all online. I'll send it to you as well, James, for you to see that. It's fantastic.
Great.
And so when I was like thinking about this opera, I was like, well, I don't like, as an opera as it stands, an opera is a very alien experience, and I mean that in a beautiful way.
Right.
You know, so it's like, and I've always kind of been fascinated with this. And like leading up to this, you know, like fragments of my work from the VR performance piece to the costumes that I co-designed and done a piece with my other exhibition with all these big hooded costumes. I don't know if you've seen them actually, you might have or not. But then I was thinking, like, I'm not finished with this idea.
Wow.
You know, I'm not even anywhere close to finished what I'm thinking of with this. And that's when I went, I'm going to make an opera, and I'm going to make this the most experiential opera you've ever been to. So it's like, it works on two levels. It will be an opera which is in a physical space, which use the participants. You're not going to be passive. You're going to be taking part in this. this opera will react to you, how you're feeling, as well. So and for me, having a brain injury and being deaf, I really want people from all these walks of life to come into this, because it's not just for people, it's not just for a certain echelon either. Right. There's a real social conscious about this opera as well for me, about a socio-economic, people from every background. And because we want to set up workshops about the digital human, and we want to take feedback from them as well. So I can't say too much. That's about as much I can say there.
Well, that's, that's amazing. And it ties so much into what we were talking about, how, I think opera, it's history. I mean, if you think about like Mozart's operas or like Don Giovanni or whatever, you're thinking about this kind of exaltation of humanity. It still seems like that's what you're doing, but in this sense of post-human, as you're talking about it, larger than just the emotions of the day, but this realization of interconnectedness and the relationship between audience and performer. But it still seems to be in that magical space that opera creates about, the most that can be.
Indeed, and I think for me, as from where I grew up and stuff, and just being from a normal background and seeing these things and always being intrigued by them, I've always had this kind of intrigue about opera, and that my family were kind of like would sing and stuff, and my gran would always be watching these like this old Indian soap opera used to be on Channel 4, and I was always intrigued by that, because there was this kind of, they weren't just watching EastEnders, you know what I mean? So it was like, so my mum would watch these kind of things as well, and I think, it's like, without coming across as I don't want it's the social justice warrior term, but I want people from where I've grown up, from where I'm from, to be exposed to these things. And this is why I want the dialogue about this creation. It's not me turning up as a guy who's come from Dundee and going, I've got this opera and I want to show you this. I want that feedback. I want that collaborative space with the people that's going to inhabit, and then that's a very prominent thing for me. You know what I mean? It's that, because art for me is for everyone. I've had to fight to gain a position here. You know what I mean? And I'm tired of that now, because I think I've got a big thing about having sustainable incomes for artists. I argue with people about this all the time. This is, it's a big thing for me. This is not just, for my ego. This is a social project. You know what I mean? It's got more arms and legs. So like from the physical opera, from when you're going into this, there's, the synopsis is basically you're on, like, I'll say on board, but you're not on board. This structure that you're in is living, right? And partially the machines, these machines are called cephaloid computers, which is a homage to Max Moore. When he says when you get frozen, they'll cut your head off and you'll be called the celophods, because you've only got your head. And the rest of the people who can afford to be lying in their whole body are just normal humans, right? So I thought, well, I kind of like that. And then this kind of notion about the worm camp. So quantum archaeology. So basically when you come into this whole structure that's living is farming brains for quantum archaeological computers that start to have a glitch. So again, like you said, kind of allude to my brain injury in a way. So what you're experiencing is this non-linear cycles of different characters, cyborgs, human beings, singing at you, or they're not even singing, they're shouting. There's like one scene I've got two AIs that are Dundonian arguing with one another in Dundonian. God. So because I want to take away this kind of, and this is playing with language, because we've always had, like this American-centric idea of sci-fi cyborg, right? So it's like, so I want to have this kind of, multilingual experience. There might be a room where they're going to speak Gaelic, There's other rooms where there's kind of this very, Latin-esque poetry that I write as well with my friend, and we're generating these scenarios. And in certain parts, there'll be sensors tracking you. There's all interactive objects. So everybody's coming into this. You're not going to be allowed to stand around. Put it that way.
Yeah. You're going to be in the swirl of experience, and that's incredible, because it ties into your art in the sense of trying to point out the network world, the network human. And I don't mean plugged in a negative way, but rather that's how we are. I mean, this does go back to Zen about interconnectedness. And I just can't believe you wrote all this during COVID. And I feel like after I heard the term quantum archaeology, I have to go lie down. I have to go think about that.
I mean, it's when I read it. I mean, again, it's just I read and I see it, and I was just like, my brain just went. Woof. And
Yeah.
as I said, the synchronicity of the Matryoshka dolls, and then that piece about these being in space, and I was like, this it just made sense. I've got to make an opera. I've got to make this experience. And I
Yeah.
mean, my whole team are fantastic. I mean, like
Sounds
me,
like it. Yeah.
well, I mean, we've managed to write nearly a finished script. It's still evolving
Of
with the
course.
director, the theatre director we've got, the Scottish theatre director, and the producer. We've written this form for R&D, and we've got basically had Cyborg Nest who make these haptic bracelets. So I done a bit of work for them for design. They came on board. Sub packs when you wear on your backpack, like
Wow.
they came on board to sponsor it because the Museum
Incredible.
of Crypto Art came on board as well. They went, this is fantastic, because I was wanting to take it again. It's a physical opera again, which then the story continues in the metaverse.
Yeah.
So it's even we've been speaking to games companies in America. At the moment from Valve, their principal psychologists, another woman called Erin from Mollusk, and she was like, "This is." It's like you're going physical to digital,
Yeah.
and then the story becomes someone else. And I don't want this to be just an opera.
Yeah.
It could be a democratized space for sharing
Yes.
ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and even more than that. So there's this all kind of ties in, and that's about as much as I can say.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot. That's a
About
lot to think about. And personally, I want to thank you for making me feel like I haven't done that much during this Corona time, because you've written you've written that
Sorry, I wasn't
you've
trying
written
to
that
do that.
script. No, it's quite all right. But I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you'll come back and talk about it in 2021 when it's produced.
Absolutely.
And is it going to? I don't want to even ask you where it's going to be produced, but I do want to touch before we leave on Dundee, because I've
Well,
been to
absolutely.
Dundee. It's a place very close to my heart. I love the dragon in the middle of the square, the green dragon, and the story, I think, that dates back between the 7th and 9th centuries about the 9 maidens. But it's a very interesting city because it's big but small. It's not a
Yeah, yeah.
not a massive city like New York or London. So I'm curious about how this smaller city that had a kind of industrial heyday, and then it kind of fell, and then it became, from what I remember, it was one of the earliest video game cities. There was a kind of a
Yeah,
video
yeah,
game
yeah.
hub, and now there's a Royal, what is it, the Royal Albert or the Victorian Albert Museum
Yeah, yeah. I
that's
spoke there
there. So
last
it has,
year.
yeah, so it has a renaissance. So it's this interesting kind of mirror of what's been going on in the last few decades. So I'm wondering how that shaped your work, like living there.
I think, like for me, like is well, growing up in Dundee as a kid, I always had fond memories of growing up when I was in the Union in Perthfield and Union Place, and there was a lot of you'd have like the nice deli with the Jewish bread and all this kind of things that people think you didn't have. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like you'd have the nice bakers and stuff. And I'm being very nostalgic, and it's quite funny because I was at Dundee last week to see my family just after COVID. So
Oh, okay.
I had a bit of a drink, but I went away on my own and ended up walking down my old street
Mm-hmm.
trying to find this time capsule that me and my pals put down in this park, right? But how are you meant
Wow.
to find someone pissed in the dark?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I was just tripping out because it was like this, I could just see shadows of my past when I was
Mm-hmm.
there, you know what I mean, of being a
Mm-hmm.
child. And I remember the game shops, like Solid Gold Games, with everybody queuing outside to see, the Super Nintendo back in the day. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that kind of nostalgia for me fills me kind of with a warm heart, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
in the city for me, what I always love about Dundee is I do love the sense of humour,
Yes.
because people are just they don't fuck about with you when it comes to that. But
Yeah.
I love that kind of pattern, and I miss that.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's aspects of Dundee that I really, like the Tay Bridge for me is just this. It's always been this colossal, magnificent piece of engineering for me,
Yeah.
and it just has so much resonance,
Yeah.
and it's always kind of fascinated me. And even like there's certain like places like the Law Hill when you go up there, just looking across the whole of this. And the graveyards. I mean, I've got a thing about
Yes.
graveyards. I love sitting in graveyards.
Yeah.
It's like they just seem to be a nice place of solace for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of ironic as well because, like 2018, I was obviously coming up for Christmas, and I stood outside the V&A before it was opening. And I says, I'll be in there. And what happened was I got invited there to speak last year with animatronic about the robots exhibition.
Wow.
So
It's amazing.
and so to come home,
yeah,
to speak in that building, just even about but just to come home and to speak about that,
it's incredible.
Was so. I felt so happy because I was like, this is my hometown. I'll defend Dundee to the hill. You know what I mean? It's like, I think Dundee has a lot of creative people, and this is where the part of I want to bring my opera to. You know what I mean? I want to bring it home. I want to bring it there.
Yeah, well, it's amazing you spoke there, because that is I haven't been back yet since it's been built, but it's an incredible structure, the museum, the Royal Victorian Albert.
Yeah, Victorian Albert.
Victorian Albert wing, I guess, from the original in London. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
but it's gorgeous, right along the river, and an incredible structure, and it's such a great story that that journey. It's not over yet, but it's great that you could go back and speak about something you've been thinking about and reading about and creating with for so many years. But before we go, I do have to point out. And I know you're a poet, so I hope you don't. Speaking of Dundee's sense of humor, I hope you don't.
Oh, here we go! I think I know what's coming.
Here he comes. Yeah, I hope you don't hang up on me. But one of my favorite things in Dundee are the quotes along the river from William McGonagall, who is considered the world's worst poet. But I love it. I find so much inspiration, not just in the fact that he kept writing and writing and writing and writing. And I don't see him as someone who was full of himself and kind of unaware. I think he just kept, spewing the stuff out, and he wasn't Shakespeare. But the fact that they have that,
there's a queue on the hill. There's no there now.
and the fact that they have his lines immortalized on cement along the river. And so I just want to close with some lines. I want to thank you so much for joining me for all this time. I'm really inspired. I feel like I want to watch stuff. I want to write stuff. I want to, so you've really inspired me, and I've learned a lot about the post-human situation, the famous postmodern, what's it called? The postmodern. There's the famous book, Postmodern Condition by Lyotard. But now, thank you for helping illuminate the post-human condition that we're kind of living in now. But it's very ironic that we're very aware of the post-human condition in the middle of a virus sieging us that is making us more aware of our bodies.
I think that makes the case for it. It makes the case for transhumanism even more.
Exactly.
It's like this is the framework that you need. This is it, man. This is sustainable living. This is sustainable living. It's universal basic income. It's a reduction of everybody polluting the atmosphere. This should be a reconfiguration and a rethink of what we're meant to be doing on this planet. Because it isn't just fucking consuming, that's for sure.
Yeah, and it's also, the more we're forced in and aware of this virus, the more I've never been more. I mean, I think Zoom calls can be hard and things can be kind of tiring, but I've never been more aware of being connected with others, either literally through conversations like this, or just we're all going through the same thing. And in a way, that's a good counterbalance to these political narratives or these media-driven narratives that try to divide us.
Yeah, indeed.
So I'm gonna. So thank you so much again. But I'm gonna end with some words. I love that you brought up the Tay Bridge, because this is the opening of the amazing poem by William McGonagall called "The Tay Bridge Disaster." It's the first stanza. So I'll leave you with this and. Beautiful railway bridge of the silvery Tay. Alas, I am sorry to say that 90 lives have been taken away on the last Sabbath day of 1879, which will be remembered for a long time.
Afe bra, James, as we say in Dundee. That was afe bra.
Well, I'm happy to come and do readings maybe at your opening party. I can be in the corner doing McGonagall readings while you have the wine and cheese. Yeah.
Well, funny you should say this, because I'm actually planning someone at the Cat's Back in Putney, a series of speakers. If you can get to London anytime soon, I'll let you know when this happens. You'd be more than welcome to come.
Yeah, that's great.
Speak then.
Well, I love William McGonagall. There's actually some great websites devoted to his work, and his legacy
the
goes
film
on.
by,
Yeah.
you know, the film was Spike Milligan. I sent Spike Milligan done a film of it, The Great McGonagall. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it. You kind of
You need to.
you cut off a little, so I lost that. What was the title of
I'll
the film?
say that Spike McGonagall, Spike McGonagall.
Okay.
Spike Milligan done a film called The Great McGonagall.
Oh wow!
From the 1975. It's from 1975.
Yeah.
It's like, and you should check it out. You know, because it's. My mate told me about it. Who's my Dundonian friend told me about it. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, he did a film about it, The Great McGonagall.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I mean, maybe he wasn't a great poet, but you know, he's not Shakespeare. But there is something important in his attempt to document and his dedication to creativity. And there's some reason why we still remember and share these words, even if it's not the highest practice of the poetic art. There's something there that's always interesting to me.
I agree with you. I agree with that as well. You know, it's creativity. Everybody should be creative. You know what I mean? Whether it's a positive thing, and I kind of agree with that. It's like don't. It might not be the greatest, but at least he's doing it. At least he was doing it.
Yeah,
you know, that's the main thing.
Yeah, he's sharing something, and us, I don't know, 150 years later, are now sharing a laugh based on his words, but not laughing at him, but honoring his offering in a way. It's tremendously inspiring, which is how I feel after our conversation. So thank you again, Hallidonto. We're gonna include the links in the description below and of the video. But is there a particular way that you think people should keep up with you or the opera, or is it Instagram? Is it, obviously we'll put your website. What do you prefer?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I use Twitter. I use Twitter a lot. I use Instagram a lot, and my new website as well. So, by all means, if anybody wants to contact me for any reason, to my work or anything else, purchasing work or whatever you like, just contact me on any of these platforms. You know, because I'm always updating them and doing stuff on them. So, and there'll be.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you again so much. I really look forward to getting an update on the opera, and wow, it sounds amazing, and I'm really inspired, and I really appreciate your time. And I look forward to seeing you. And I mean, I'll see you in London, but seeing you in Dundee would be even better.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, James, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, man. Such an erudite conversation. Absolutely.
Okay, well,
amazing.
Stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.
No worries, mate. Bye-bye.